Are you wondering how in the world to stay healthy and sane right now? Well, I'm excited to release my new ebook and share 5 ways to balance your body, mind, and heart to help you during these stressful times. This is the complete essence of what I love to share, all about connecting with your root wisdom and your pelvis, balancing the root and sacral chakras, and more. There are worksheets, journal questions, guided meditations, and tons of insight. I know you'll learn a lot about yourself here. Go to alyssafinnick.com/Rooted Woman Starter Kit to learn more and get access right away. That's alyssafinnick.com/Rooted Woman Starter Kit. And this episode is brought to you by Sunbasket, my favorite meal delivery service and the one that saved me after I had my baby, and even right now when I have busier weeks than normal. I've tried them all, and this is one of the freshest ingredients and most unique and flavorful meal options. Choose from paleo, vegetarian, and everything in between. If you want to get $35 off and some free gifts, head to alyssafinnick.com/sunbasket and enjoy your first order. Our menstrual cycle reveals so much about our health. Yet we've been taught to think that our period's a curse and raging PMS is normal. It's not. And now, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, also known as PMDD, is on the rise, and sadly, Western medicine's only solution seems to be birth control and antidepressants. There is hope though, because supporting your body, mind, and spirit can help you find relief. I know this personally, as I used to have PMS symptoms during both my ovulation phase and right before my period, and they were pretty severe. In fact, I have also received the diagnosis for PMDD, but I've found more balance through proper nutrition, my yoga practice, and more. So tune in to today's episode as I explore and dive into this subject with Melissa Sue Vair. We're going to learn more about her story of struggling with a PMDD diagnosis and how she uses yoga to feel better, and you can too. Welcome to the Wild Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Finnick, and this is your space to learn more about the importance of slowing down, taking care of yourself, and the mind-body connection. And most importantly, how to reclaim your health by listening to your body's innate wisdom and reconnecting with the earth. Welcome back. It's Alyssa. I'm excited to have my guest, Melissa Sue Vair, here, and we're going to talk yoga for PMDD. And so that's yoga for premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which some of you ladies may have been diagnosed with or heard about, and understanding the different difficulties with your cycle. So thank you, Melissa, for coming on to the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And so I always like with new guests to ask, what got you into this? So, why did you want to focus on yoga for PMDD and the healing benefits for that? What was your personal experience? What got you here?
Okay, sure. Well, so I've always had like a passion for women's issues. I did my undergraduate degree in women's studies. And so social justice has always been like a part of my frame of reference. And before I started teaching yoga, I worked in a domestic violence and sexual assault center. And so I was really close to women's issues at that point in my career as well. And so I started yoga because I was having like regular anxiety due to the work that I was doing. It was just too much overstimulation emotionally, especially. And so as I grew in my yoga practice, I started to see that the problems that I was having with my cycle were cyclical. I was having these massive changes in my personality, in my physical wellness, in my emotional and spiritual wellness. And so when I started to research a little bit more, and then I actually found out from a friend that she had been diagnosed with premenstrual dysphoric disorder, it kind of dawned on me oh, there's a name for this thing that I'm experiencing. And so I never really super like felt strongly about PMS. Like I never used the term like, oh, I'm experiencing PMS, because I always thought that like it was kind of vilified. Like it's like a joke, right? It's just like constantly used as a misogynistic joke. And like, it didn't relate at all to like the hellish experience I would have once a month. And so when I learned about PMDD and I learned that there was this thing kind of beyond PMS that has such severe changes to how I feel that it actually like interrupts my ability to function some months. And so as I grew in my yoga practice and I grew in my understanding of PMDD, I eventually realized like my yoga practice serves to soothe and assist my symptoms of PMDD. I don't have to feel this way if I do certain things throughout the month to aid that time that's coming. And knowing like, okay, this Hell Week approaches, you know, I need to make sure that I'm doing certain things to feel better. And for me, like the other options like birth control or an SSRI, which are most commonly prescribed for PMDD right now, didn't work. Birth control gave me horrible cystic acne, like the terrible kind, like on your jawline. And like, maybe that was worth it to not have my PMDD symptoms, but at that point it made me feel so self-conscious. It didn't really feel worth it. And then with SSRIs, it basically took like my wide range of emotions and sandwiched it into like this tiny little, mostly disassociative state. And so those didn't feel like options for me. That didn't feel like a solution to what I was experiencing. And yoga did. The more I practiced yoga and the more I understood how therapeutic yoga works, especially, the more I felt like my cycle was being managed. And so with the arrival of COVID and moving my yoga practice entirely online, I decided it was the time to really work on addressing other people's PMDD symptoms, sharing what I know about therapeutic yoga, and giving these tools to other menstruators so that their cycle doesn't have to stay the same and they don't have to feel like two people each month.
Yeah. Well, you know, I shared a little bit with you about, I had been diagnosed with PMDD, and through nutrition and yoga and other practices, like I barely have it, although it changed after having a baby a bit. And so I'm rebalancing. I remember going to my gynecologist and was like, because I had issues, I felt like I had PMS twice a month, during ovulation and during your typical PMS time. And, I'd be just, like a different person, not yourself, just like you described. I just remember it's like, I had heard somebody else they were prescribed an antidepressant. And then so when I was talking to my OBGYN and they're like, well, you can be on an antidepressant. I was like, no, that's not the answer. But I also have been like that after years of going to doctors. And I would like, that's not the answer. Like, there's something. Then, of course, which all led me to the holistic health anyway. You're not addressing the root. So I totally can relate with that. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners can, because it's just not, it's not okay. It's, to just be like, oh, well, that's just how it is. Here you go. This is the only answer we have. There's other answers. And so I'm glad you're sharing this.
Absolutely. Well, and that's part of the reason I also wanted to bring more awareness to PMDD, because it's at this like crazy intersection of all these different things, right? Like there's women's health issues in there, which like we already know aren't taken as seriously as they should. There's still outrageously high mothers who die in pregnancy. Like there's still all of these issues. Like there's still the period tax. There's still things like period poverty. I mean, there's all these different things that intersect with PMDD. And, it's like body positivity, mental health and wellness, suicide awareness. It has a lot to do with like fat stigma and fat shame. I can't tell you how many different people that I've worked with PMDD have said that their OBGYN just told them to lose some weight and that would help solve their PMDD.
Oh my. Wow.
So you have all of these things. And then you also just have like queer health issues, because not everybody who menstruates identifies as a woman. And so if you're a trans menstruator also struggling with mental health issues, what kind of resources do you have? And so for me, this just felt like the right place to talk about all of the different things I really care about for women's issues, for queer and trans issues, for health issues in general, for mental health issues in general, and then also just all of the body positivity movement to, you know, say that like this is something that can affect anybody, any age, like any age menstruator, basically up to menopause. So,
Yeah.
you know, for a lot of folks, that's like 50 years of their life, 40 years of their
right.
life.
Long time.
Yeah.
Long time.
For it to be a monthly issue and a monthly thing that you struggle against.
Actually, just as a side note, I worked in the transgender health clinic here in town as a yoga therapist, and I actually helped someone breathe through a pap smear who I, you know, identified as a trans man who, you know, of course, still, you know, had menstruated, had to have pap smears, you know, all of stuff. And, you know, people don't think about that and the resources. So I'm glad that, of course, the Transgender Health Clinic exists here in Indianapolis for that. But yeah, I mean, it's so devastating for every woman out there. I mean, you know, for, you know, if you're, you know, a trans man out there, you know, dealing with that, like, I just can't even imagine. The only way I can is because I've, you know, dealt with it at the health clinic here. So I'm just as a side note, you know, that's something I'm glad you're bringing that to light as well, because everyone needs support. So, so how has yoga helped, or how has yoga helped you specifically, and how can yoga help women or anyone with PMDD? And are there specific practices? Are they helping with the symptoms, with regulating hormones, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, certainly. So I am not a nutritionist, and I'm not like an herbalist or anything like that. So I don't say that I do any hormone balancing type stuff necessarily. I just don't think that's my realm. That's not my specialty. But I do think that with therapeutic yoga specifically, going kind of beyond the postures and getting more into like the subtle energies of the body that are deeply affected with PMDD, and working on some of those energies, you know, like having a blocked sense of safety and security is going to affect how you feel when you're in that dysphoric state. And so a lot of it is just about like self-regulating. And so I have found that a lot of the people that I'm talking about PMDD with in the community that I'm building, they aren't yogis. They're people who have PMDD, and they're kind of starting to hear, well, I think mostly from me, that yoga can help with this. And it's sort of absurd, you know, because if you look at any of the PubMed articles or anything like that about PMDD, they all say like stress management and exercise should be like a first source of care. Well, okay, but like so I just like do any sort of exercise, like any form of stress management. And so that's kind of the role and the gap I see yoga for PMDD filling, because most people don't know how to use their breath to regulate their nervous system. Most people have no idea what a mudra is or how to use a hand gesture, which I think of as one of my specialties. It's one of the things that I love to use in my personal yoga practice and have found super relief from. So I think, you know, changing the way we think about like being healed too, that it's not an immediate thing. Like the yoga for PMDD isn't a pill, and it may not be something where you feel results immediately. And that practice building is the piece that I want to encourage people, that like, this is a lifestyle change. Like we're trying to talk to our bodies differently. We're trying to have a different relationship with our mind so that we can maybe witness what we're thinking a little bit more than react and, you know, just respond initially to what we're thinking. So it's using those different like higher levels of therapeutic yoga, and we're really working into like the whole kosha system, and moving away kind of from just like, oh, well, you do like a hot yoga practice, you do a bunch of vinyasa, and if you lose 15 pounds, then your PMDD will be fixed, because it doesn't work like that.
No, it may be worse actually, depending how your body is, and with hot yoga and too much. Yeah. So yeah,
exactly.
That's what, you know, people don't always understand, because so a lot of my listeners are new to yoga, or sometimes even new to a different approach to health. I actually was surprised by that. I found that just in talking with people and people who came on my retreats, and I was just like, oh, maybe a person's dabbled in yoga, but that not all, some of them are. So but not everyone is like, I'm a yogi and I have a huge super practice, that sort of stuff.
Right.
So I like to break some things down. But it's even as a yoga therapist, especially as I was studying to become one and teaching, I remember specifically teaching veterans. And it was the most subtle things had the most profound impact. And I just, like, people, all they see, like anytime you have a conversation about yoga, somebody's, oh yeah, I just went to the hot yoga class. And I'm like, well, that's not the yoga I do. And, blah, blah, blah. It's helpful for someone, great. But just, just letting everybody know, sometimes it can be the more subtle practices that can be the most helpful. And glad she's nodding her head. We're on Zoom, so we can see each other. But yes, I mean, don't you agree? Yeah,
absolutely. And that's been my experience. So when I was studying for my professional yoga therapy certification, some of the most impactful people I learned from were the yoga for vets with PTSD, doing that work. And again, like you said, it's so subtle. I mean, it's little things about the energy that I bring into this space when I'm having these conversations. And so that was like a lot. That really opened my eyes up, I think, to the first time for like what therapeutic yoga actually is.
Yeah.
And if it can work in these extreme cases of folks who've seen stuff I don't even want to imagine and have dealt with situations and had to make decisions in split second moments that, changed everything. Like if it can help them, I think that my life is actually very kind of nice, but I still have this problem that I deal with that makes me feel awful, that I need assistance with. So along with them, I also studied with Matthew Sanford, and that, was just like, no one can see me, but I have the type of body where I feel like I could have just done like the regular yoga, like let's just do difficult poses, and it's about how you look, and it's about like the Instagrammable picture. But because of the teachers that I had and the depth they took me into my body, moved it way past this like gross idea of just like what is in the physical, and deep into this level of like what does it feel like? How does it feel like to be in your body and to be you? And so that had a huge effect on me. Like it made my whole teaching about accessibility and trying to reach people who wouldn't necessarily think yoga is for them. And, not at all trying to get them to have a certain look or reach some sort of physical goal, but how do you feel? How does it feel to live inside your home?
I love that. Well, that's the true essence of yoga. And of course, the media, you watch every commercial. I feel like yoga, well, I don't watch TV very much, but when I did, I felt like yoga was on like every commercial, and you just see people in skimpy outfits and super bendy. And so they don't, the regular person doesn't realize like, no, yoga can be for you too. And so that's why I love interviewing people who are sharing this in a different way. And I think that, well, and as I mentioned to you, and anybody who's listened to my podcast knows that I am huge into like paying attention to what's going on in your pelvis, physically, energetically, because it's the foundation. And, whether it's structurally or energetically, everything goes through there. And so we need to pay attention, because our body will tell us, hey, pay attention. That something's going on, and yoga can be that pathway, like you said, to get deep within yourself and connect, because that's when you learn to start listening. Like yoga is the pathway to learn to listen to your body, where you can just ignore it half the time. So, and there's all kinds of different types of yoga that can help you do that. that more subtle type, or even, yoga nidra too, meditation can help really just give you so much insight, and that empowers you. It empowers you when you have that insight. So Melissa, what advice would you give? So, maybe I should ask this first, because we kind of went in just talking about PMDD, PMS, that sort of stuff. How would someone, without having the diagnosis yet, just like you said, oh, a friend got diagnosed with it, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm having that. Like, for example, I remember when my friend had gotten pregnant, she was telling me how she was, and I was like, my hormones feel like that all the time, and I'm not pregnant. Like, what the hell? And so it was like this indicator to pay attention. So what would you say are some of the symptoms of PMDD that will kind of, like, someone who's listening may go, maybe I need to investigate this a little more and know that it's not just normal?
Yeah. So to kind of follow up on one of your points before, just like yoga is a lot of insight into our body and allowing us to listen more, our menstrual cycle can also be the same. I mean, it can tell us so much information about our health, and it can be our physical health as well as our mental health. I mean, one of the things I found with my PMDD experience is when I would ovulate and then hit Hell Week, I would basically turn into a rage monster. Like all of the things that I had tolerated the 2 weeks prior, I suddenly could no longer tolerate at all. Like my index for bullshit plummeted. And so it's not that I just had an issue with rage. I had an issue when I was feeling normal, in quotations, where I wasn't addressing things that bothered me. And so learning that and seeing like, okay, there's a cycle here of like, my partner and I have a huge fight every single time I'm like premenstrual. Maybe it's not just that I'm premenstrual. Maybe things that I'm not saying when I feel normal are part of the problem. Like that's also an indicator that something is unhealthy here. Maybe not just in my body, but also in my relationship.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So,
And that,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. I was just going to say, and that is a sign, like, like that feeling of rage or not being able to tolerate. Like, so I would kind of joke with some people, like, I think all these symptoms are kind of a blessing in disguise, because they let you know what kind of shit you don't want to put up with.
Right.
But at the same time, you can feel out of control. So you do need to learn, like balance it out so you feel human and like yourself. It's like, but maybe it's showing you, like, just like you're saying, there's a part of yourself that you're not being truthful in, maybe that first part. There's so many ways the menstrual cycle can show us, obviously physically, nutrition and that sort of stuff as well, imbalances, whether you're too light, you're not having one, you're too heavy, all the premenstrual symptoms. What other symptoms would you suggest or not recommend, but would you say that, this might be a sign that it's more PMDD rather than just, because, actually any form of PMS there's an imbalance somewhere. But, it's been kind of accepted, like, oh, you just go through this and this is how it is. But what would you say makes it PMDD? I mean, I know you're not a doctor diagnosing things, but just so our listeners would kind of know, because sometimes that's the way we figure things out, is we learn something and go, no, wait a minute. It's like I did with my friend who was pregnant, who's crying all the time and not her, felt like not herself because her hormones were all messed. So.
Right. Yeah. So first, I would like to say there is an awesome self-screen quiz on the International Association of Premenstrual Disorders website. So it's iapmd.com or .org. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to check the ending.
We'll link in the show notes. So I'll make sure I get that.
Awesome. Yeah. But so one of the biggest things that differentiates PMDD from PMS is the severity of symptoms. And as well as the timing. So PMDD often gets conflated with bipolar 2 disorder. And so the only way to actually know if you have PMDD is through tracking your symptoms. And you have to have like a variety of the symptoms consistently, basically, like through your cycle, you know, and that was usually a pretty good indicator. But the biggest ones tend to be like irritability or mood swings, which ties into the rage piece. Extreme fatigue, so like you actually turn into cement and you can't get out of bed. Sometimes there's severe paranoia. So, you know, thoughts of like not being enough, needing to leave your family, your partner, needing to leave your job. There's also like some brain fog stuff. So like feeling depressed and also just feeling like you can't really concentrate, but also just feeling like foggy, like you're just not totally able to tune into what's happening around you. And part of it is that it's like stuff is being affected neurologically. So you might have like headaches, dizziness, you might have some joint pain, back pain, numbness. Bloating tends to be a huge problem too. So people with PMDD may bloat way more significantly than folks with PMS. And then there's also sometimes gastro issues. So either not being able to go to the bathroom or going to the bathroom way too much. And all of those things usually have a stronger severity that can sometimes lead to suicidal ideation. And that tends to be one of the kind of big triggers, is that like your symptoms are so bad every month that you just wonder what the purpose of all of this is.
Oh, I've
and
totally
like,
been there. Yeah. I know what that feels like. I mean, that's what led me to more of the holistic health and everything. I totally know what that feels like, because I remember going like, my life's not that bad. Why the hell do I feel like, you know, it is? It's because you're not yourself.
Right. Because something's not firing the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm glad we're talking about this, because I am guarantee people listening are a bit like, oh yeah, I felt that way, or I'm feeling this way right now. And, you know, that's why I like to share this information, and I appreciate it. So I know you have a group, Yoga for PMDD, on Facebook, and so I'll make sure to link to that as well in the show notes. And you have different practices and that sort of stuff on there, right?
I do.
Okay, so someone, you know, who might have a diagnosis or kind of relates to what you just said could go in there and join you and learn more about managing PMDD and even starting a yoga practice.
Absolutely.
With you. Great. Are there any final thoughts or anything else you want to share with our audience about Yoga for PMD or anything else?
Sure. Well, so I do just want to plug myself a little here, because I am working on building a website. And so once I do, I will have practices available that are symptom specific. And I'm also going to be launching a couple courses. And so one of them will be for practicing yoga throughout your menstrual cycle. So how to approach it at, like, you know, during your time you're actually bleeding, and then kind of going all the way through. And then I'm also going to offer one for people who haven't practiced yoga but have PMDD and want to start getting comfortable in the yoga practice to learn how to manage their PMDD. That's
wonderful. Great. So, so once, you know, we'll have notes. We'll have a link in the show notes, if I can talk, to any of those once, you know, when this is published. And then, you know, if, like I said to everybody out there, you know, join Yoga for PMDD on Facebook, search for the group with Melissa, and, you know, you'll know when she launches all this stuff as well. So, well, thank you, Melissa, for being on the show. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Alyssa. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for helping me to bring more awareness to PMDD.
So, I want to hear from you. What did you think of today's topic? Direct message me on Instagram or Facebook, or better yet, join the Wild Wisdom Collective, my free Facebook group, and chime in on the discussion. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and insight. And if you love what you're hearing, please take a moment to click the button on your smartphone to subscribe. Or, better yet, write a review and tell me why you love tuning in. And maybe you'll be featured in our listener spotlight on a future episode. I cannot wait to see you again, same time, same place next week. Wild blessings.